When I was at the Auburn Wesley Foundation, I discovered that I had a passion for leading Bible study and being involved in Bible study. And the story I'm about to tell you is probably one of the first times where that really kind of came about, or I discovered that, because I almost hijacked an entire class that I was not in charge of leading. And it came about through the reading of the passage that we are looking at today, or at least the story that we are encountering in the gospel today. The story of Jesus in the temple right before the Passover. And particularly the scene where he goes and he begins to flip over the tables and to cast the money on the floor of the those that were doing the temple tax conversion and running out all the livestock there. That began to be, I don't even think this was really the center point of the lesson, but this event began to be the center point of our discussion as a group of college students. We were sitting around and discussing that, and as things often do, there sort of began to develop two sides of an issue. There were two in the class that felt fervent that they needed to deconstruct this passage to examine the argument that Jesus was angry in this scene. And I, a big person who struggles with anger, was clearly on the other side going, no, don't take this away from me, right? And me and a couple others were on the side that Jesus clearly gets angry here, and this is him getting frustrated and upset in the temple. And I couldn't quite understand why they were fighting for the other side of that argument. And one of the guys says, well, if he got angry, he sinned. And I said, well, that would be tragic. And now I understand why you're trying so hard to make sure that Jesus doesn't get angry. But let me let you in on just a little bit of information. As one who struggled with anger their whole life, I will tell you that one of the things that you do when you have to go and work on that is one of the first things that I came across was that this is something that is in God's wheelhouse. God gets angry, but God only ever really gets angry at injustice. That is the limit to what angers God, is injustice in the world, and injustice in situations, and injustice in people's personal lives. That this is something that is very much in God's wheelhouse. But as a junior in college, I was unaware of that and didn't have any knowledge of that. But I couldn't let go of the fact that this just doesn't seem like a place where God is just passionate. You know, that Jesus is just being passionate here. This has got to be more than that. And so we were kind of going back and forth, not really getting anywhere. And the college intern finally assumed leadership of the Bible study again, wrangled it from our feeble attempts to hijack the lesson, and said, let me just do this. Let's read it again, and then y'all stop me if something interesting comes out or something you hear differently happens. We'll stop and we'll ponder that, and maybe we'll figure out where we're going. So we read the passage again, this time more meditatively and paying real close attention in the most silence I've ever heard a group of college students in like this. And all of a sudden, when it gets to that line about Jesus braiding the rope, the quietest girl in the study says, stop! And I mean, we almost fell out of our chairs because, well, can you imagine the most quietest, meek person in the room going, stop! Right in the middle of the Bible passage. And so, where did she stop us? On that line about Jesus braiding the rope. So we stopped and we go, what? And she goes, he braided the rope. He braided a whip. And we're still not getting it. What? What do you mean? What does that matter? She goes, I mean, do you not know how to braid something? And me and this other short-haired guy, I think I had a shaved head at the time, were like, no, we don't have the slightest clue. She said, braiding is not easy. It's not like you just look at something and go, oh, I think I'll braid today. Like, you actually have to learn how to do it. It takes time and it takes intentionality. Now that I've watched my wife, who's very good at braiding hair, do it, I get it, and I get what she was saying, but at that point I had no clue. She's saying, It took intentional effort, which answers both of your questions, right? Because one, it doesn't say this isn't alluding that Jesus flew off the handle, right? And it was so funny how she solved the tension that we were having in this Bible study around this issue. Because she goes, he clearly is angry, but it's premeditated anger. Like he's thought about it. He's marinated with it. It's controlled, Josh. But Jeff, he's clearly angry. And so all of a sudden she solves this passage for us. And I think it's important that we catch every little detail in this passage, because if we don't, all we go off of is our own experience. And for these two guys in this room that day, their experience of anger was almost entirely just sinful. Like they had never seen anybody be angry and do something appropriate with it. I was telling the story this week of my father-in-law when I was in college. He was an HR manager. He was the guy over all the other HR guys in the plant. And so it's very frustrating when your father-in-law does something like that for a living, because you're never allowed to just be upset. Because anytime I would complain about something, he'd go, well, have you thought about it from this perspective? Have you put this shoe on? Blah. I'm like, Mr. Wayne, can I just be mad about this for 5 minutes? Can you just let me have this? I don't want to deconstruct it. I don't want to see it from their perspective. I'm right, they're wrong, that's it. And he's like, yeah, it's more complicated than that. This one time, something happened with Rebecca and her roommates in college, and I know we had moved into the corner of the corner of angry and upset, beyond control. And I look at Mr. Wayne, and I go, what do we do now, Mr. Wayne? And he goes, nothing, until I calm down. And he walks away. He said, I'm too mad to do anything. He walks out of the room, and I just stood there for the longest time going, I didn't even know that was an option. And so maybe they were like that. Maybe they had just never seen anybody quite do something appropriate with that emotion. And so for them, they just saw it as sinful, and therefore it can't be Jesus doing it. But for me, I was sitting there going, this clearly is more than Jesus being like, I really care about the temple. You guys got to go. You know, it's more than that. And that's the whole point of this, right? Is we're supposed to see this contrasting character of Jesus where he is really, really fired up, and where he's very upset because something major has happened and injustice has occurred. Because at this point, the temple is full of people who are financially taking advantage of people who should not, and they don't need anybody to take advantage of them because they're already being taken advantage of every time they turn around. The people that the system that was in play in the temple, during this moment in time, the only people that weren't financially put out by this were people that were very, very well off financially. They had plenty of money. They had plenty of disposable income. Also, the people that make the rules, the priestly class, was excluded from all of these things. They didn't have to pay the tax. They didn't have to convert their money to a temple coin. They didn't have to bring animals for sacrifice. They were excluded from the financial burden that they were putting on everybody else in this group of people that would come and worship at the temple. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the common people in Jesus' day, just regular old people, were financially burdened by coming and practicing their religious life. They were literally being taxed just for showing up. They had to take their Roman coins and convert them to a temple coin. Now, do you think they did that at like a no interest, no gain sort of system? Or do you think that there was probably some manipulation going on there? I guarantee you there was. Then, on top of that, they also had to pay for the animals that they had to come and have sacrificed to atone for their sins. And that was a financial problem because in the Torah, there's lines that explain what do you do if you don't have enough money to provide a goat. Well, you get to bring turtle doves, and if you can't afford turtle doves, you share it with a neighbor, and if you can't even afford that, you bring grain or something like that. So you know that this was a financial burden and that there are some that were naturally excluded from being able to do that. And so even when they could muster the money to practice their faith and to atone for their sins and come to the temple as was custom and as was customary, they were being taken advantage of by the very people that should be leading and guiding and extolling and bringing people into the temple itself. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the hypocrisy of all that? Can you imagine what that made God feel like? Can you imagine what that would make Jesus feel like in this moment? Did not make him feel good. Did not give him a warm and fuzzy sensation. It instead filled him with an indignation that was palpable and real. Enough so that he would sit down and meditatively braid a rope and run them out. And in doing so, Jesus would move forward the story of what was eventually going to come to him. What was eventually going to come for him, you might say. Because in this running and clearing out the temple, what he has done is he's done two of the big no-nos if you're going to be a religious leader in the first century. First, he's disrupted the economic system of the day. Now, all I want you to do is I want you to imagine what will happen to you if you go into downtown Coleman and shut down the economic center of Coleman. If you were to do something with a keyboard, per se, and disrupt the economic life of this town, what do you think is going to happen to you? They are going to come after you with both feet. You are going to become public enemy number one. That's, first of all, Jesus has disrupted the economic system of his day. And there is a tall price to pay for such activity. We don't take kindly to people that disrupt the economic functions and the economic life of a town or a temple or a system. And Jesus, in one fell swoop, has done that. And let me tell you, this is why you don't like preachers talking about money. Because as soon as I start messing with your financial world and the financial picture of the church, passion gets exuded by you, the congregation, towards me, the pastor. It just happens. When somebody messes with your financial world, it doesn't take a lot to get you very defensive and even in some cases outright enraged. And so that is what Jesus does in this moment in clearing out the temple. But two, he does something else. He has alluded to the fact that he is a revolutionary. Because it's not just the braiding of the rope. It's not just the clearing of the temple. Because the religious leaders see this and go, whoa, wait a minute. On what authority do you have to act like this? You're just a troublesome, itinerant preacher from Nazareth. Who do you think you are to come in here and do this? By what authority, what sign do you have to prove that this is something you get to do? And Jesus says, tear down the temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. Well, we know, and the author of the Gospels know, and pins into this passage the interpretation of that. The temple he was talking about is of his body. But to the religious leaders, and dare I say Rome, what you just heard someone say is, I will destroy this building and I will rebuild it in 3 days. It sounds like he's talking about destroying something that was central to the people of his day, particularly the religious leaders of his day. Once again, if you go into our wonderful town and you disrupt the entire religious life of our town, dare I say, demolish something that is sacred and holy and seen by such in the eyes of the whole town, what do you think is going to happen to you? It's not going to take a lot for them to come after you with both feet, not only for disrupting the economic center of the life, but now the social, religious aspect of life in that culture and in that community. And all of a sudden, Jesus has got two strikes out against him. If you want to know why they crucified Jesus, I give you no other place to look at than right here, because he does enough in this one passage to convince a whole group of people this guy is not just lowercase trouble, he is capital T trouble, and he has got to go. And now, not only does he have the religious community that has always been frustrated with him, upset, but now he's also involved the Romans. The Romans now have reason to watch this guy and go, hold on, this guy's making a play. He's trying to be a zealot. Zeal for my house will consume me, is the way some translations have that line translated. Zeal is the root word of the term zealot, which was like a religious terrorist of sorts. It was somebody that came to seek to overthrow Rome or whoever else had power at that time and in that particular moment. Overthrow them so that their system might regain control and power. Jesus begins to be looked at by his religious people and by the governing party of his day as a zealot, as a troublemaker, as somebody who's seeking to cause a big, big problem in their community. Now, here's what's so interesting. Jesus says that he does all this in one fell swoop, one line, more so than even the braided rope. He does it with one line: tear down this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. The funny thing about that is we know, thanks to the Gospels and because we're good Christian people, we know Jesus is talking about his actual body. And I've never thought about this before, but the people who are passionate about the temple, the physical brick and mortar building, they have a passion for that. And because of their passion for the brick and mortar structure of the temple, they will tear down his body. And then the passage is actually fulfilled in proper context. And so here's what I want us to be wary of today. And we need to really examine ourselves today, because here's what is on the line for us. Jesus puts his body on the line. He is willing to have his body torn down, broken down for us. That's the whole series that we're in. We're looking at why that's important. Jesus ensures that his body will be torn down in this passage. Because what he's done is he said to the religious people who are passionate about a physical structure, if you tear this down, I'll rebuild it in 3 days. What was really going on is what he ensured when he said that is that they would tear down the true temple, which is Jesus' actual body, his flesh and blood. And then it will be rebuilt in 3 days. The metaphor even is more expansive than that, because every time the temple was destroyed, whether it was by people before the Romans or what the people that attacked Rome and tear it down years after this, what we know happens is every time the temple is destroyed, the people are scattered. What happens to Jesus' own apostles and his disciples, and to all the followers of Jesus at his death, at his trial and the crucifixion? Well, they scatter, they spread out, they go and hide. It's only after the temple is rebuilt that the people come back. They do that every time the temple is rebuilt. They come back. Well, Jesus, at the resurrection, the temple will be reassembled, and the people come back. And here's the message that Jesus leaves them with, and that gets passed down to us, is that our job is not to regather and reassemble the temple. Our job is to take the message of the temple, Jesus' flesh and blood, his body, and his message, the good news of the gospel, and to go and proclaim that, making disciples and baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And here's the promise. He says, if you do that, if you go and you make disciples and you baptize them, lo, I will be with you always. And so here's the question. What are we, the church, holding on to, clinging on to, trying to fight to ensure holds up under scrutiny? What are we desperately trying to ensure doesn't get demolished? What are we terrified we might lose if Jesus has his way? What are we fighting against and trying to prevent happening? Because here's the thing. That's what they missed. They missed, when Jesus is talking about this, that he's not talking about their physical temple. He's talking about his body. But because of their fear of what they will lose, They tear down the physical temple, the real temple, which is Jesus' body, because they don't get it. The question is, what are we afraid of? What are we trying to hold up? What are we trying to defend? What are we afraid we're going to lose? Because we may be getting it wrong. We may be getting it wrong, and we may be missing out on what Jesus is really trying to accomplish in the world around us. That's the question for us today, is to examine, Jesus, you've had your body broken for us, you've sacrificed your body and your blood for us. Now what are you calling us to do? Because that really is the true and the lasting picture of the church, is that things change in the church and always have. And it always looks different than it did before. So what is that new thing that you're calling us into? What is the thing that we have to give up? What is the thing we have to risk losing so that you, the true temple, will truly be with us? Not just today, but forever. Amen and amen.